Hey, before we get into today's video, I have a very quick and very exciting announcement. We have officially partnered with Jensen USA. Right over here. You can't really see that because it's blurry. Right over there. They're essentially an online bike shop where you can buy bikes and parts at really great prices. They'll ship pretty much anywhere. I know for us here in Canada, I've ordered through them many, many times over the years, and it's usually like free 3-day shipping to Canada if you order over a certain amount. So that's really, really nice. They're great people to work with. They've been awesome. And they've also given people a way to help support our channel in the very easiest way possible, meaning buying bike parts. So if you use this link right here, which I'll also put in the description and in the comments section, if you use that link when you buy your bike parts and bikes off of Jensen USA, it helps us keep the lights on, pay the rent, and keep making videos forever, hopefully. And to start things off, Beth and I wanted to thank you all for being the amazing viewers and people that make all of this happen. And so we're gonna do a $100 USD Jensen USA gift card giveaway to one of you, and all you have to do is use this link. Again, it's in the description and in the comment section. Use that link, head over to Jensen USA, and what would you buy if you just all of a sudden had $100 to spend at Jensen USA? Just put whatever that is in the comments section below on YouTube. You don't have to post the link to that product or anything, just type out whatever you want to get. And we'll pick one of those and be in contact, and we'll get you a $100 USD e-gift card for Jensen USA to start you off. So huge thanks to Jensen USA for coming on board with the Loam Ranger channel, and to you all for watching and for being a big part of this. Make sure you enter the contest. Let's get into that review video, hey? Move to the Rockies, they said. It'll be fun, they said. Oh, it's mid-October. And when it gets to be this time of year, when it gets cold, the snow starts to fall, I usually start thinking about two things. One of those things is good coffee. And don't worry, I'm not gonna subject you to some long, drawn-out vlogger coffee making scene. I would never do that to you. This coffee is so good. To be honest, I've been off of the caffeine for like the last month or so, but as I said, when the snow starts flying and things start getting colder, I start thinking about two things, and the first thing is good coffee. So here's to socially acceptable psychoactive drugs. And the other thing I think about is I've had an entire season on my bikes, and typically year after year I wind up on very different builds. Some years I'm on RockShox, this year I'm on MRP. I'm trying out different brakes that I've never tried before, and brakes that most people haven't tried before. Different tires I'm trying this year, at least on the downhill bike. And I'm always really curious at the start of the year whether they're gonna play nicely together or not, and work well with my riding style and what I do and where I ride and all that kind of stuff. So in this video, Beth and I are gonna go over our bikes this year. What did we think about changing bike brands going into the... I just realized I'm wearing my fluffy slippers. It's too late now, I guess. What did we think about completely changing bike brands this year over to Ibis? Yeah, we're gonna go over all those questions. But there is one thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately, especially when it comes to starting to plan out this video and talking about all the fancy parts. And this camera's on the other side of the garage. I'm just gonna grab it. Feels weird talking to you guys from all the way over there. All right, that is a little bit better. Okay. So what I wanted to talk about before going into this very gear-centered video, I just wanted to go over one quick thing, and I think is really, really important, especially in the year that we're in. And what I'm talking about is premium bikes and premium parts and FOMO, fear of missing out, and all those sorts of things. And I think it's important to note and to start by saying that before this channel kind of started taking off a little bit, my entire life as a mountain biker was spent trying to get the cheapest, most budget-friendly parts I possibly could. You've got to sell this one to buy the next one, and I usually have to sell a couple other things around the house that I had lying around just to afford it. And now I am riding quite literally some of the very, very best top tier bikes and bike parts in the world. But like I was saying, going into a very gear specific video like this, I always feel weird about it because I'm here talking about these premium parts that I know a lot of people are not gonna be able to afford. And if you have the money in your account to buy something like Zip wheels, for example, they're incredible. Do it. You will love them. It will do great things for your hands. You're not gonna feel things as much. There's more traction, blah, 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 blah. All of those things, they are amazing wheels. But here's the thing. If you don't have the money to buy Zip wheels or an Ibis Ripmo V2 or any of the other fancy bits on there, just don't worry about it. Don't go into debt for bike parts. And I know pretty much all the marketing managers for all the parts on this bike, and I can tell you for a fact that although they would love for you to buy these bike parts, they would also never want somebody to go into a bad financial situation to do so. You can have the best bike in the world with all the best parts, ding, 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 and go out in the woods and have a ton of fun. Or you could be riding a hardtail from 1996, and if you take that bicycle out into the woods, you're going to have a really, really great time as well. So I guess all I'm saying here is that, yes, new, fancy, amazing bike parts, they make a difference out on the trail. They have their benefits and they're great. So if you do have the money, oh boy, go and get that stuff. But if you don't worry about it for one single second, because all anybody wants to see is you out on the trail having a great time on the bike that you have already. I appreciate every single one of you being here on this channel and watching, and I always want to be real with everybody. So let's get into the details and the thoughts on that build right there. As you may or may not know, Beth and I changed bike brands going into 2020, and pretty different bikes in many, many ways. Oh geez, what am I doing? There we go. Better. Oh, that was close. Okay, yeah, I've changed my clothes a bunch of times in the filming of this, and that's because it's been like 5 days so far from when I started filming this and got a little coffee to now, and I still haven't finished filming this. And part of that, I just wanted to re-record some stuff. Part of that was there was a COVID scare and I had to get a swab into my brain and wait 2 days for that. So I was quarantined for a while, but we're here. We are gonna do this right now, so let's get into it. This has been my main bike all year. I've been riding this bike almost every single day since January. That is in minus 20 degrees Celsius weather on snow and ice. That is plus 35 degree weather out on the BC coast. And it has been nonstop. This thing never quits. I've been really impressed with it. And honestly, I was really unsure of how things were gonna go going into this year, because I was on a very, very different bike than this one last year. It's an Ibis Ripmo V2. It is a size extra large, and we're gonna go through it from front to back. I'm gonna give you all my thoughts, the good, the bad, the ugly. Let's go. Going on to this, we went out to Squamish, we got it built, went to Squamish, started riding, and I was just really impressed right off the bat. The sizing, I got a size XL. I'm 6'1", which is like 185 centimeters or so. I'm about 190 pounds all kitted up. And so this bike, I thought an XL would be good. I could have gone large as well, but I went XL because I'm used to a longer bike. And so with that kind of sizing, it fit me really, really great. I just had to push the saddle forward just a little bit on the rails to make it fit just right for climbing. And otherwise, yeah, it's nice and stable descender. I think the biggest surprise for me for this bike was like one, just how solid of a pedaling platform it has, mixed with how buttery it is going over fast chundery stuff. When it comes to like small to medium size rocks and roots, when you're smashing through it, actually if you watch the first ride video of this bike, the first time I ever hit some fast rocks and roots, I kind of freak out a little bit. Wow. Whoa. Because I wasn't expecting it at all. And in fact, my last bike, it had 180 millimeters of travel in the back, and this has 147. And yet this bike was just like, it was like a magic carpet over that stuff. It was so smooth, so beautiful. I've never missed that extra travel. As far as the geometry goes, right off the bat, I did change it just because I know that I like really slack bikes. and I cannot lie. And so I put a Works Components 1 degree angle set on this. So instead of a 64.9, it is a 63.9 degree head tube angle. And along with that, that changes a lot of geometry numbers, especially because I put a 160 millimeter fork on this, which is the normal fork length for this bike. But if you're gonna slacken out a bike by an entire degree on the head tube angle, usually you wanna bump up your fork length by about 10 millimeters to kind of keep the bottom bracket height the same and the bar height the same. But unfortunately, MRP doesn't make a 170 millimeter 29er fork. Hopefully soon though, MRP. 435 millimeter chainstay length is good. My previous ones were really stinking long at 455 millimeters. And so getting onto this one, I just immediately started goofing around on the trail a lot more. There was some slower rock drops in Squamish that I don't think I would have done with really long chainstays. So I find these chainstays are splitting a nice difference between too long, too short. And even personally still, I would love to see like large and extra large Ripmo V3s have like 440 millimeter chainstays. Now I also went from an aluminum frame to a carbon frame this year. And what did I think about that? As far as the characteristics of the bike goes, I don't know if I'm good enough to really tell the differences between a premium aluminum frame and a premium carbon frame. I can press into things really hard with this bike and there's no weird issues with like warbling or anything like that. It's been really stiff. It's been great. Yeah, there's one thing that I wish I was able to do before taking it to go and ride, and that is covering it with a full ride wrap or bike shield protection. Because carbon is, you got to take care of it a little bit more. If you crash, you're more likely to get, chips into the carbon and stuff like that, which I have a couple in here, not deep or anything, but they're there. And so for anybody getting a carbon bike, I definitely recommend getting a full wrap over the entire bike. And on my next one, I will definitely be doing that. It's got a DW Link suspension platform, and one of the things I learned this year is that not all DW Links are created equally. I really, really enjoy the DW Link that Ibis has put together. As I said before, it pedals great. It's really smooth over everything. And part of that has to do with the MRP coil shock that's on there as well. It's tuned for this bike and for me as a rider and my weight and all of that. I've never had any harsh, clangy bottom outs on it. I'm on a 500-pound spring on that shock, and that put me at just exactly the right amount of sag. I think it's about 14 millimeters of sag. And so I know all of that is set up great. Yeah, really pumped with it. What kind of changes would I make to the bike? For a V3, let's say, I would probably put on a longer down tube protector. It's a bit of a short one on this one. And I'm pretty sure Ibis knows what's up with that, given that the Mojo 4 that we also have, even though that one's rated as a very trail-centered bike, that one already has a longer down tube protector. So I think that's gonna be standard on all their bikes from here on out. So I'd like to see that. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's kind of it. A mullet option? That would be sweet just to play around with. I don't know. Oh, and I cannot forget about this frame bag. This is the vegan bone-in pork chop from Ibis. And they sent me one. They said, hey, we've got this new bag coming out. It's just for the Ripmos and the Ripleys, which they never had a bag for before. And they said, hey, do you mind throwing it on, taking a couple pics and helping us promote it when it comes out? And I said, sure. I'm not really a frame bag type person typically. So they sent me one and I thought I'd throw it on for a day, take a couple pics and then take it off. And that was 2 months ago and I have never taken it off. I put it on the bike, I went for a night ride to go try it out. And so I put the battery in there and a little short cable up to the lights there, and that was awesome. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then the next day I went for a ride. I'm like, I'll leave it on and I'll throw like an emergency jacket in there. And I realized it can always just stay in there and I'll always have a jacket and I'll never think about it. And I also realized on the next ride, I could put my gimbals and all this other junk in there on the pedal up and not have to carry it on me the whole way. And so anyways, I've used it on every ride ever since. Get that bag if you have a Ripmo or a Ripley, because it's good. Okay, let's go front to back on this bike and go through all of the component spec. Let's start with the tires. Now, I have been riding these tires since midway through 2019 when I first asked HLC and Michelin to send me a set of tires just to test out. And they did, and I haven't stopped riding them ever since. These are the best enduro type tires I have ever ridden. They have the grippiest cornering lugs ever. And they've also lasted an incredibly long time. And we're comparing one that has 1,000 kilometers on it, like 620-ish miles, versus a brand new one, there's almost no difference. That's insane to me. This front tire can be good for multiple seasons. And I have not been riding lightly this year. Yeah, so they're really long-lasting tires. Like, the wear has been fantastic on them. I've been really impressed with that. I would say my only critique of these tires is that the really sweet, is it on that side too? Yeah. The really awesome like Michelin logos that look so good and contrasty, I feel like it wears off a little bit too quick. But other than that, the tires have been flawless. Out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bikes that we have, so 10 different tires running this year, not one single one has had a puncture or a slice or anything. That's pretty major. And we've ridden in some of the gnarliest bike parks ever with these tires, and bike parks where Beth and I have gone and had 3 flats in one day and nothing across the board with all of our Michelin tires. So that says something. But yeah, so Michelin Wild Enduro, I have the GumX 3D on the front, so it's a softer compound, and the GumX compound in the rear as well. I have to double check on that. But these are both the 2.4 widths of the tire, and I think 2.4 is perfect. Now, what are those tires on? They're on a set of Zip wheels, and that is another product that I just went and tried on my own accord a couple of years ago, and I've never stopped talking about them since. I've told stories about them on this channel constantly. Zip is one of our sponsors for this year, which is like, oh man, holy grail. And so the wheels are very, very different. They're carbon wheels, but they're unlike any other carbon wheel on the market. They have spent years of R&D research into the layup for these wheels and the thicknesses and all these different things. And they've come out with a product that has meant more traction than I've ever had before. As I said before, we've never popped a tire all year long, which a big part has to do with the Zip wheels. Basically because Zip wheels, they move with the ground and with impacts. And so instead of like a standard, very stiff box section carbon wheel getting slammed into by a rock, when this thing gets hit by a rock, the rims actually move and bend with that impact. And so 1, that saves your tire, and then 2, that saves the rim. And at the same time, that means more traction. And so one of the biggest things that I found is when I'm in like off camber situations, I can really hold a line really well with these because of the ankle compliance that the wheel has. So I've been stoked about that. They've done what they've said on the tin. One of the things that people ask me about with these wheels are they too flexy? And I'm about, as I said, about 190 pounds, so not a super lightweight or anything. And I'm on 29-inch wheels, so they're gonna be the flexiest of the bunch. I can count twice out of 1,000 kilometers of riding on this bike in particular, where I've actually felt some flex, and that was going like mock chicken into a really sharp berm and just like pressing as hard as I possibly could. Oh yeah. And then that's it. The rest of the time, any sort of flex is completely unnoticeable, other than the fact that it's giving you more traction and all those kinds of things. But only good flex to speak of, basically. On this bike, I'm on the stock Zip hubs. They haven't caused me any issues whatsoever all year long. They've been great. Sounds nice, solid amount of engagement. That's been good. No complaints or anything to note there, actually. I know that sounds kind of boring, but everything just kind of worked. All right, next down the line are the brakes. I used Code RSC brakes on this bike this year, and this is actually the exact pair that I was using on my last bike last year, so I just took them off that bike, put them on this bike, and kept going. I haven't bled them in 2 seasons, so that's pretty amazing, and that's the best performance I've ever had out of SRAM brakes, which is awesome. Just like everybody else, I never touched the bite point or the contact point of the pads once I just set them all the way in, or all the way out, basically. I think between Code Rs and Code RSCs, I've spent a lot of time on both this year. If you can spring for the RSCs, do it. They were way more hassle-free than the Code Rs. The levers are still super solid because I run on those bearings rather than just bushings. I find the Code R bushings got sloppy really, really fast. Yeah, I was actually really impressed with these brakes for the most part. I found that the brakes needed time to heat up. before you can get like real maximum performance out of it. So every now and again, if it was on a colder day or whatever, I just wouldn't have any power despite a really like good feeling lever. There was no contamination on the pads or anything. It would just sometimes take a while to warm up, at least with the metallic pads. And as far as the rotors go, I went for a really big 223 millimeter rotor on the front and a 203 millimeter rotor on the back. And I really like that. And one of the really interesting things that I didn't think was gonna come out of that, I mean, I knew there was gonna be tons of power, which there definitely is, but if there's one thing that surprised me is that it really saved on pads. I am somehow, and I don't understand this, after 1,000 kilometers, I am on the first set of pads. I've been riding this bike constantly, almost every single day, doing big, long mountain runs, and going faster than I ever have before in my life, ever. And yet, first set of pads, there's still life left to go on them. And somebody online said, yeah, with the bigger rotors, you do have more pad life. I didn't realize it was gonna be by that much. Usually I'd be at least into my second set, if not the third by now. But one note, you know, with the bigger the rotor that you go with the SRAM rotors, you do have to start worrying about a little bit of warpage if you're really heating them up. And also if anything hits them in travel or on the trail, it's a lot more likely that it'll get a little bit warped. And so I have had to work on straightening these out a lot this year. All right, next on the list, the MRP ribbon fork. This is an MRP 29er ribbon, obviously, set at 160 millimeters of travel, which is maximum travel for this fork. Again, hopefully a 170 version coming out soon, please. This fork is a little bit different because you fill up the positive air pressure and the negative air pressure separately. And it's one extra step for setting up your fork, but it really offers a lot of adjustments for you. And I found that to be quite nice. Especially like when I was riding in Whistler with this bike for multiple days. When my hands were kind of feeling it, I can add a little bit more negative pressure here, and that just makes the fork a little bit more supple than I normally would have it. But it's just really nice to set it in those sorts of ways for those kinds of days. It's got the MRP ramp control, of course, and so I basically set that to the middle setting and left it. It works great in the middle setting, as most suspension settings do. And I really didn't have to touch this fork all year. Again, it's got 1,000 K on it now, and I should have done some work on it about halfway through that when the service interval hits, but I didn't, and so it was super smooth for the first half of the year, and it got a little less smooth about midsummer. And I thought, well, it's time to change the seals and do the usual stuff that you would do on a fork. And then it just got better. And so I didn't do anything about it. I really probably should have, but it feels great again. So I'm just gonna let it do its thing. But yeah, there's been lots of good support from this fork. Again, I've bottomed it out a couple of times, but it wasn't harsh. It wasn't a big clang or anything. I feel like I was able to set it up really quickly and easily. So no complaints on this fork. I already mentioned the rear shock and how I really enjoyed that. If I didn't mention this already, it's a 500-pound Enduro SL spring, not the progressive spring. You don't need the progressive spring on this bike, at least with this tuning. Back up to the cockpit of the bike here. We're using 1UP bars this year on all of our bikes. They are not a sponsor. They were last year, but not this year. But we can still wholeheartedly recommend these bars to anybody. This is a 35 millimeter tall bar on this one, just so I didn't have to have my stem height too high. And it's great. It actually does what it says on the tin as far as taking out some of like the really rough stuff in your hands. My hands have never felt better than this year, especially with the wheels incorporated in that as well. It's just, these bars really help smoothen out everything. I run it at 780 millimeter length, and they look fancy and nice. And attached to those are DMR death grips. I've always used DMR death grips for years and years and years. We are also using the 1UP dropper post. It's the 1UP V2 dropper post, including the lever as well. It works great. It goes up and down, even when it's cold outside. This is a 180 millimeter post in here. Yeah, I could probably go to the 200 or 210, but you know, maximum drop isn't always the best thing. I hate to tell everybody, but there is a reason why you look at the World Cup downhill bikes and the seats are, you know, sometimes right about where the stem is at, if not higher. It's because you actually use your seat while you're cornering. And so I don't like maximum drop on whatever bike I'm at, because that usually puts the seat too low for me to use it when I'm downhilling. But anyways, 180 millimeter post, it's worked really well. The lever isn't the smoothest lever in the world, but it's got really good, great grip on the lever. itself, and again, it's never let us down. And actually, one of the coolest things about this post is that without any tools whatsoever, you can actually fine-tune how high the post is. And that's something that I've done on Casey's bike to take it down from a 150mm dropper to a 130mm dropper. It took about 5 minutes, so that was really, really cool to be able to sort of micro adjust the height on the post with almost zero effort. All right, everybody always asks me about whatever the heck this is, and this is a Garmin watch mount, but it's modified. For whatever reason, the Garmin watch mount, it actually normally goes way out this way and way out this way, so it's almost the same size as a wrist, but I don't understand why you'd need that on a handlebar. And it also wouldn't fit with my brake. So I just lop those sections off, and now I throw my watch on it, tighten it up, and it's great. The saddle of choice for this year, actually there's 2 saddles of choice that I've been going back and forth on. This is my main one, it's a WTB Volt saddle. I also have a Silverado, but I find the Volt fits me way, way better. As you can see, it also looks almost brand new after a full year of riding and crashing and all of that. So that says something. The other saddle that I've been using is an SDG Bel Air V3 saddle, and very similar shape to this one, which is probably why it also works for me. But a little bit less padding, so it kind of depends on what I'm doing that day and whether I'm wearing a chamois or not. But yeah, this is my typical everyday saddle, the Volt. Really, really like it. Okay, on to drivetrain. It's a kind of a mixed bag, I guess. For the shifter up front, I have an XX1 shifter, and that's mated up to a GX derailleur, a GX cassette, a GX aluminum crank. I don't know if you could tell where we actually had to spend our own money on this bike or not, but that might be a clue. It works good. It's kind of weighty. It's definitely some of the more heavier parts of the bike, but yeah, it does its job. I smashed into many things with that GX crank, and it didn't snap on me like my last carbon crank did, so thumbs up. Yeah, it works really good, and to be honest, it is how I personally set up my own drivetrain when I've got to put my own money into it, and so I think it's worth putting the money into the shifter, the most money into the shifter, and so I went with an XX1 shifter on that, and then more of the budget-friendly stuff everywhere else. Because I've ridden XX1, I've ridden X01, I've ridden GX and NX, and you can't tell the difference between a GX and an X01 or an XX1 shifter, or derailleur, sorry, but you can notice the difference between an XX1 shifter and a GX shifter. They feel very different. You can do more of a custom setup with where the bigger paddle sits on the XX1 shifter. It's really quite nice. And same goes for the cassette. You're not gonna notice any performance difference, in my opinion, between an XX1 and a GX. I've had both. This one's actually lasted really good this year. Yeah, no complaints. And of course, on every single bike I have on ever, I put a bash guide on there. This is from MRP, and especially with the low bottom bracket, because of how I have my specific bike set up, I have used that bash guard so many times this year. Yeah, really happy I have that on. And as always, we have the Pedaling Innovations Catalyst pedals on the bike. Again, I've been running this product for years now, and they're an actual official sponsor for this year, so we're super stoked to work with James and his awesome family in Pedaling Innovations. And so I don't ever want to use another flat pedal ever. If you're a flat pedal rider, go buy a set, because they are the grippiest, most supportive pedals that you can get your hands on out there, especially if you're using 510 shoes. 510 Freerider Pros and the 510 Sam Hill shoes are the best shoes for these pedals, in my opinion, that I've used so far. I can't say enough good things about these pedals. They're really fantastic. They stop my feet from blowing off the pedals. They stop calf cramps from happening on long downhill runs. They're just really good. Now, mud fenders. We use Mucky Nuts fenders. They're also one of our sponsors, and I've been using them for like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years now. It's been forever. And this fender, especially this one's a couple years old now, it's responsible for getting you all of the muddy day footage on our channel. Because without this fender, we would have nothing. I think that's about it. On to the downhill bike. Okay, downhill bike. Now obviously Ibis doesn't actually make an HD5 DH. This is just a regular HD5 with a bunch of weird bits all over it. This is an extra large HD5. It's a 170mm front, 153mm rear. The reach on this one, again, because of all the weird stuff I've done to it, is a little different, but it's essentially, again, around 500 millimeters of reach, which is perfect for my 6'1" height. It's got a Bartlett on the front, dual crown Bartlett, as I'm sure you've noticed. And this is actually a 29er Bartlett that I got for it because I was gonna put it on other bikes. And so I'm running a 29-inch dual crown with a 27.5 front wheel. And the axle to crown is way too tall for this bike, and yet it just all freaking works. And that's one thing that I've learned this year, is that the offset on this fork is way off from what the standard offset should be, and it rides great. The axle to crown on this fork is way higher than it should be, and it rides great. I don't know, it all just worked. So normally when you would get a Bartlett and put it on your bike, you would bump up the travel by an extra 10 millimeters. So if I had bought the 27.5 version of this would be a 180 millimeter fork on this bike. But it is at 170 because I got the 29er version and I was trying to keep that axle to crown as short as I could. And yeah, it's really stiff. And I actually did notice a difference in a big way going between a dual crown and a single crown, kind of back to back. Man, I just kind of want to ride a dual crown on all of my bikes because it feels so good when you're smashing through really tough stuff or landing off of big jumps and those kinds of things. It's such a great confidence-inspiring feeling, and especially just seeing that dual crown on the front of your bike, something mentally to that. It's just, yeah, it makes you go and send stuff maybe you normally wouldn't. The bike itself is super burly. It's a really stiff frame, which works out really great with the other parts that I have on it. I've got the zip wheels on this as well, even though they're not rated for DH. I know plenty of riders and enduro champions that ride these and smash them harder than any downhill rider would, and they're perfect. They've worked out great. All the same benefits that I talked about on the other bikes, just in a 27.5 package. I won't cover everything on the bike because there are a lot of similarities with the other ones, so let's just cover the differences. One of which is I have the downhill, the Michelin downhill tires on here with those incredible yellow and blue graphics. Everybody's been wanting to get their hands on these downhill Michelins for years and years and years. They've been teasing us forever, and they just finally officially came out earlier this year. I have the DH22 on the front and a DH34 in the rear. The 22 on the front, I just want to ride this tire 24/7. I have reached for this bike, even though I should have had the trail bike on me for that ride, only because I wanted to ride with this tire on the front and actually these brakes on it too. These two things made me ride this bike way more than I normally would have this year, and I pushed it up fire roads and trails just because I wanted this whole thing going on the way down. Back to the tire, the DH22 is literally the grippiest tire I've ever used in my entire life, even grippier than the Wild Enduros, which is saying something, because that was the other top king before using this one. Michelin, please, please, please make a DH22 with an Enduro casing, a lighter casing, because I will run it on every bike that I have forever. It's that good. Go try one. The DH34 I've only ever used as a rear tire. It's their fastest rolling downhill tire, and so I thought that would be a great rear tire, and it is. It's a little tiny bit narrower than the DH22, even though they both say that they're 2.4s. That back one measures out at like a 2.38 kind of thing. Anyways, perfect rear tire in my opinion. But I hear lots of people use them for a front as well. Just like the rest of our Michelin tires, we haven't had any punctures, any leaking, anything. They've been totally solid, so that's really cool. On to the brakes. These are TRP DHR Evo brakes. I sent them an email a few months back for this downhill project specifically, and so they sent some my way, and I just want to run them on all of my bikes. Take all the other brakes off my bikes, put these on please, because they have the best bite point that I've ever felt, super consistent. They have these new resin pads that they've put out, and normally I'd never ride resin pads. But they told me to try them. And between the bite of the resin and the modulation of the brake in general, it's been the very best combo I've ever used. I've got a big old 223 millimeter rotor on the front of this thing, and so that's been awesome, and a 203 on the back. But there's a huge difference with the TRP rotors on these newer brakes. They are 2.3 millimeters in width, the actual rotor itself, which is much, much wider than a standard rotor. I can't remember exactly what it is. It's like 1.7 or 1.8 or something like that. But what that means is, you know, if you were to take a standard rotor from any other brake company and just grab it and go like this, you could bend it. And these ones you can't. They're really, really stiff. And so when you're really heating them up, I didn't get any warping. And also I bashed into all kinds of things with them and traveled with them in the back of the cars haphazardly. And I haven't had any warped rotors all year long, which is really huge, especially for big giant rotors like the 223mm. If you are looking at new brakes, look at the TRP DHR Evos. I can't think of one bad thing about them. Actually, I would love a little bit of a shorter lever, because with the power on these brakes, you don't need such a longer lever, but that's pretty nitpicky. And TRP also sent us their TRP 7-speed drivetrain for this bike. And so that's the TRP shifter up front and the derailleur and a 7-speed cassette. And they've just worked. I don't know. Nothing's gone wrong with them. I've had no issues. And so what more can you ask for from a drivetrain? It's held up really great. I can see almost no wear on them. I mean, it is on a downhill bike, so it's not like I was doing a ton of pedaling anyways, but yeah, it's worked really good. And when I first bought it, I did have to tighten up the clutch mechanisms just a little tiny bit, and you only need to move it a small amount to have a big difference. Other than that, yeah, I just set it up. They've got some great markers on there for setting up the chain length, a really easy visible guide for setting up chain length. I thought that was a great, nice touch on this derailleur and setting everything up. I've got an MRP bash guide on here. Of course, I believe this is a SXG carbon on there, and it's done its job beautifully. Next up, the only other big difference on this bike is the saddle and post. Obviously, this is not a dropper post, and I reached out to SDG because I've always loved the look. Honestly, I'm just going by looks here to begin with anyways. I've always loved the look of the SDG I-beam saddles and posts. And so they sent me their top-of-the-line iFly downhill saddle. This is what Aaron Gwynn puts his butt on. And it's super, super tough. I've crashed a few times on this bike, and there is not a mark on this saddle. It is really, really strong and durable. And it's on their carbon I-beam seat post. And I was really pumped with how the I-beam system works. It's just one bolt here, you loosen it off, and you can adjust the tilt and moving it forward all with one single bolt adjustment. You tighten it back up and you're done. Yeah, any other notes? It's a 35mm one-up stem. It's got the one-up bars. These are 20mm rides instead of 35mm because I was trying to keep the front end a little bit lower. And that's worked great. It's got a lot of nicks and marks on it from falling and such. Yeah, this has just been a really fun bike. I haven't been on a 27.5 bike in a long time, but it was great. And with how I have this bike set up with the suspension and everything, I didn't really notice that much as far as going downhill that I was on 27.5 wheels. In the air, it feels great. I'm able to flick the bike around a little bit more. But yeah, as far as mashing through rough stuff, I don't know, it's been awesome. The really slack head tube angle probably helps too. I measured this out the other day. It was 63.1 degree head tube angle with this oversized fork on it. So that might have a little something to do with it too. And that's about it for the HD5DH. Again, let me know if you have any questions about this bike or my other bike or Beth's bikes, and we will get back to you in the comments. Speaking of Beth's bike, let's check that one out.
So I started off the beginning of the year on the Ripmo AF, and I really, really enjoyed that bike. It was the first time for me to be on a bike that really felt like it catered to my size and my weight. We had the shock set up properly for me, and there were so many things that I really enjoyed about that bike. And I honestly didn't think that I would love another bike. When the people at Ibis first said to me, "Hey Beth, we want to get you on the new Mojo 4 that's coming out," I was kind of like, oh yeah, okay, I'll try it out. But I really didn't think that I would love it as much as I do. And since I got the Mojo 4, it has been my go-to bike almost every single time we go out for a ride. The Mojo 4 is a 27.5 trail bike. It's 140 mils in the front and 130 mils in the rear. So for me, having never ridden anything with that short of travel, I just honestly didn't think I would enjoy it that much, but I was so surprised. I have loved how good it is at climbing, but also it has never held me back while descending. So this bike has pretty new school geometry. It has 440 mils reach and a 77 degree seat tube angle. And this bike has a 65.4 degree head tube angle. I've been having so much fun on it. I actually took it on our last trip to BC and I didn't bring my Ripmo, which was a surprise to both Ryan and I. So bringing out the bike on this trip to BC was actually a huge deal for me because I knew that we were going to be riding trails that I was actually pretty terrified to ride last year. And so I was a little bit nervous about how it would handle all the gnarly, steep things that I wouldn't normally take a trail bike on. I would usually reach for the Ripmo, but I also knew there was going to be a ton of climbing, and this bike beats out every other bike when it comes to climbing. And so this is the bike I wanted to have with me. As soon as we got out there, I realized very quickly that it was only my mindset that was holding me back and thinking that the bike wasn't capable. At first, I was looking at drops that I would normally hit on the Ripmo, and I was like, oh, if I had my Ripmo here, I would hit it, but I don't know if the Mojo can handle it. There's not as much travel. Pretty quickly, I realized that I just needed to get out of that mindset, and the bike was so much more capable than I was giving it credit for. For the component spec, Ryan already covered a lot of the components like the zip wheels and the Michelin tires. As far as differences go, I have the Shimano SLX 2-piston brakes. Don't laugh at me. Shimano. I love these brakes because they haven't given me any issues all year, and they're super grabby, which kind of can throw you at first, but now that I'm used to it, I really like the response time. I have the Code Rs on my Ripmo AF, and I've had a lot of bleeding issues with them this year, so these ones have been super dependable. The SLX drivetrain has been really solid. The shifting uphill is actually really smooth, so that's been a really cool thing to experience. I also have the Chris King hubs, which look really nice and sound awesome. Before I tried the WTB Coda saddle, I had never found a saddle that was really comfortable for me. And once I found this, I immediately put one on both my bikes because it's just my favorite saddle. The 1-Up pump with the Fidlock water bottle has been a really solid little unit. I love having the pump and the tool all together so I don't have to carry extra things in my pack and on my body. And the fact that I can fit a full-size water bottle in this small frame is amazing. And I've got the nice, simple, classic black Mucky Nuts face fender, just working hard while we're filming. I knew this bike was gonna be a lot of fun on mellower trails, but I had no idea how capable it was gonna be. It really surprised me.
So you don't have any critiques of the bike at all?
I don't have any critiques. Sometimes when I'm riding like steeper, gnarlier stuff, I feel like I'm getting thrown around more than I would like, but it's still super capable. It's crazy. But
so we're gonna give them nothing as far as critiques.
I don't have any critiques, I don't know. Yeah, if I was going to ride Whistler for like 4 days in a row, I wouldn't bring this bike. I would definitely bring my Ripmo AF though. Between the Ripmo AF and the Mojo 4, I feel like I just have everything covered. From the gnarliest, steepest tracks to the steepest climbs, I am 100% set. All right, so there you have it. Those are the bikes we've been riding, and those are our thoughts on them. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to enter the contest by clicking on the link for Jensen USA in the description, and then having a look around to see what you would spend the $100 gift card on. Come on back here and leave a comment and let us know what you'd use that $100 gift card for. All right, we'll be picking a winner in 2 weeks, and we'll see you on next week's video. Cheers, everybody.